Hello, everyone, and welcome to Handmade here, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. Well, I don't know what we're going to do today, but we might do some memory profiling, or we might just not. I'm not sure I care about it, and I might save it for some time later. So I don't know what I'm in the mood to do. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, which is basically what you should do, because, it's not like we don't have plenty of things to choose from that we can do to move the engine forward. So I'm going to go ahead and get to it. Today's day 270, so you're going to want to go ahead and grab day 269 source code if you're trying to follow along at home. That's really all I have to say. So where we left off, let's see here. Where we left off is we've kind of got our debug system doing most of the things that we wanted to do, and I made like a little nice kind of like HUD line, like a heads up thing that so when the debug system is completely collapsed, it kind of just shows us a quick little piece of information that tells us like the frame rate and those sorts of things. So this is a little sluggish. Everything is kind of slow because I had to reboot the machine. Those of you who were watching this live know that like Windows decided to kind of poop out on us, but it's back now, and so I think we're all good. Looks like we're running correctly. So here's our little line. When we drop it down, we then get a bunch of information that we can look at if we want to, and all of that is fine and dandy. So I don't know, let's just like I said, do whatever I want to do. I can be whoever I want to be. It's a free world and a free country, so let's go. Well, some countries, depends where you're watching it from, to lesser and greater degrees depending on where you're watching from. It's a pseudo-free country here in the US, so you can make sort of a game that you want to make, as long as you don't try to publish it on like the Apple Store or something, because then you can't make the game you want to make. You got to make the game that they're going to let you publish, which is a different game probably, but doesn't matter. Point being, here we go into Handmade world mode. I'm going to see like, okay, so we run the game right now, and maybe it'd be a good time to sort of like get this stuff a little more under control, because I now kind of know, I finished off how all the design stuff works, and I now pretty much know how all of these things are supposed to work. And much to the chagrin of people who really love smooth scrolling, there is not going to be any smooth scrolling in the game. At least, if we want to make it smooth scroll when you go from screen to screen, that's okay, but this is not going to be happening in the game at all, because there's essentially everything in the game has to have the concept of like a room that you're in, and so even when you're on the in the outside part of the world, it wants to be more like a traditional game where you go from screen to screen, and not, you're never going to have that sort of I'm in between two screens kind of a thing. So for example, if we go up here, you're never going to have the thing where like this, where I can walk between these two segments. That's never going to be allowed. Like, you pretty much have to walk to the edge and then hit edge and hit this, and then you can be in another room and go, right? So that's just how the design works. So it's non-negotiable, I'm afraid. But you've seen how we did the scrolling stuff. So if you are making a game that does want to be more about smooth scrolling and that sort of thing, feel free to do that, but we're not going to be doing that here. So anyway, what I kind of wanted to do, I guess, is maybe we should start thinking about cleaning up that sort of code there, that world code. And if you remember, when you go into world mode, the way that this works is we sort of have this concept that the first time through, if it hasn't initialized things, right, it initializes them. And so when we come through here, in fact, I guess I don't really even remember exactly how we decided to divide it up, or when the world gen happens. I guess now I think about it, world gen, I guess, still happens out in, does that still happen out in the game state stuff? I want to, because we kind of pulled this stuff out, but we haven't really looked at it in a while. So we kind of have this sort of state where I don't remember if we pulled out the world gen stuff, like, add wall was a thing, right? Where did that end up going? So here it is, and it's in this particular thing, play world, And yeah, so it looks like it looks like what we do is when we call, yeah, so we pulled it out to the extent that when you actually say we're going to play a world, it does the world generate in here, right? And that's how that works. Makes a bunch of random stuff for you, and then you start playing. So that stuff did get pulled out, so that's all good. So anyway, first order business here is ground chunks are not a thing. Ground chunks are gone, so we have to pull the ground chunks. So they're going to go away. And one of the things that's nice about that too is that'll let us, at some point when we want to clean up the renderer, since I don't think we're ever going to be rendering in a background task anymore, which was something we were doing before, this will let us not have to worry about that situation, which I think is kind of a nice thing, because yeah, we had to make a bunch of concessions to make the ground chunks work, and so we could pull those concessions back out again and simplify some of the code in the future in ways that would probably be nice. So I'm going to go ahead and nuke the ground chunks. Ground chunks are gone. Goodbye. It wasn't really all that nice to see you, actually. So I'm going to get rid of all of these, and I'm going to get rid of the ground chunk like storage and all that stuff. So anything before where we had ground chunks has to go. Now those should have been in here somewhere. They should have been stored in the state somewhere. I'm assuming they ended up not getting moved over yet to the storage. Yeah, so they're still in here. You can see them in the transient state. So those ground buffers are going to go away, and they're not going to be around anymore. Here's our low priority queue stuff for processing. And now that I think about it, I don't really want to delete the low priority queue entirely. I don't think. Because that's how we load things as well. Yeah, so those I want those to remain. I don't know if they need to be there necessarily, but I do want those to remain. So it's just the ground chunk stuff that I want to get rid of. So these are gone. We don't have the concept of them anymore. So goodbye to you. I need to indent that over. And let's see, ground buffer count. This is the stuff that recomputes those ground chunks in the case where the executable got reloaded, and I don't want that either. So all of that stuff should be gone. And now when I run this, we should be good, although of course we could go fix that texture thing today too, is another thing we could do. That might be fun. So now when I run this, I should see exactly the same thing, but now that ground chunk stuff is gone, which is kind of nice. So all right. So what I would like to do now is start to kind of pull this world rep stuff together a little bit more. I want to kind of tighten this stuff down. I just want to kind of go through everything, kind of get it ready for game code implementation, right? And this game, like I said, design-wise, oh, I don't have my mischief. Come on, mischief. 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 There we go. Once this takes a little bit to load because we've got a lot, if that makes sense. We've got a lot. Okay. So what I was trying to say was, so what I need the game to actually be able to do now is I want to be able to make it so that there's the concept of a room, and that doesn't necessarily have to be baked in to any sort of data structure or anything. We could have different sizes if we wanted to like zoom out or zoom in, since we can do that with the camera pretty trivially, right? But there is going to be an actual grid. So there's going to be like this actual visible, like very obvious concept that there are individual squares. And as I implement more of the game, I think you'll kind of see why that is. But I need to actually have this concept of grid squares. And so things are not really going to be allowed, environmentally speaking. There's this very heavy prioritization of that grid. And so I'm going to want to sort of pull back, sort of gather back a little bit of that ability to sort of specify where things are in terms of a grid basis, And I'm going to want to do something where I say like there's an int 32 or whatever that is the grid square index, and be able to talk about those so that as the world is generated, I know where I'm talking about in terms of these grid squares, and I can make them. Okay. And then we're going to do some stuff for drawing later when we add another art pack to the game. But for right now, I just need some way of drawing where those grid squares actually are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make there be, I think, actual... I want to make there be actual grid squares. So there's actual entities, and there's grid entities, so that I'm not sure how to explain this. So I actually want to make an entity for each grid square, and that entity would have like how information about that tile, right? And I don't. The reason that I want to do that at the moment is because I want to be able to push the combinatorial aspects of the game as far as I can. And so although it's going to mean that there's a lot more entities than there should be, because there's going to be like hundreds of entities on the screen that wouldn't necessarily have to be entities per se, because we could compress them down and talk about them in a more simplified fashion, right? I'm actually not going to worry about that, because I just want to make the decision in this particular game that it's more about having a wide, diverse way in which things can interact and react. And so everything is going to be simulated, including like the ground. And so because I want to do that, I'm just going to say up front that I'm going to accept the inefficiency that brings, because this is an important part of how the game's going to work. And anything that flows from that, requiring more memory, like, maybe this game's footprint has to be bigger, maybe it's slower and like can't run on as lower end platforms because we're simulating too much stuff, who knows, whatever it is, I'm just making a decision to make that, I'm making the decision that I want that to be the way that it works. So I'm going to go ahead and start to make that change. And again, this is not really a big change or anything. This is sort of like how we had it working initially when we just started out with the tile map thing. And all I'm doing is I'm sort of making a tile map with the entities so that they can still kind of be arbitrary, and we may even want to play with that a little bit in the game as we go forwards. We may want to make it actually eventually so that, not everything is a regular grid. Like, we could then make irregular grids out of entities, and still the game works the way it works or whatever, right? That could be a thing. But I want to be able to recreate those grids. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into that world mode situation here, and I'm going to look at the add wall, this is the thing that we were doing before. And I'm kind of looking at how this stuff got added, and this stuff I'm going to start to probably hit a little harder. I'm going to start to streamline this and make this a little bit more real, because it's all kind of a little bit zygotish is I think the word I've been using. It's a little bit underbaked, right? Okay. So here is the code that creates this. You can see that the code creates it creates things per screen already. And you can see that what it's doing right here is it's sort of calling code to create a room, and that room is passing the parameters that are based on how many tiles there are and that sort of stuff, right? And we have the concept of the tiles per width and all that sort of stuff. I don't know, where is that stuff? Tiles per, there it is. Being 17 by 9 and all that. And so when we call the function that creates the standard room, the reason that we're getting this as our room is because I set that 17 by 9 to be the width that I wanted. So we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, in the way that we were doing this, we had a bunch of things out here that were like space entities and these other sorts of things. And those entities we were sort of playing with how we were going to represent the movement of the player. And again, it was kind of useful to do that sort of stuff. And again, like I was kind of showing the basics of that. And as we were kind of exploring how the engine worked, that's a good thing. But now that I know specifically, like I've solidified exactly how I want movement to work, the way that movement actually works in this game, per the design, is that you move from a cell to another cell, always. So your dude cannot stand in between two cells. The game doesn't actually allow that to happen, if that makes sense. And again, that stuff we'll sort of get to as we get a little bit further down into the implementation. But what that means is that I want, or rather I need, to represent how you move from place to place in a way that's more specific than just a vector that I add and I allow the player to move around. It's going to be a little more complicated than that. And so again, that's what I'm going to start working with now. So the first thing I'm going to do is we have this concept of entities. I don't know if you remember, it's been a long time, obviously. But hey, if I remember, you should remember. So we have this concept of entities, and there's types in the entities. I think, is it in sim region where we have the entities? Yeah. And we have some things here that's like space. And what we said is that space is a carved out area where you can move. Well, that's actually not going to be, I don't think, necessary anymore. I don't think we need to create extra entities, which are space entities, which are, telling you that you can go somewhere. What instead I think I want to do is just, there's the concept of an entity that, and I mean, in some sense we are keeping it. But it's floor, right? In other words, the entity type is now like a square you can stand on, like a standable thing. And so instead of calling this space, which is not really indicative of what I actually am trying to say, what I actually would call this would be, floor or something, or something like that, right? Or a standable. I don't know. Entity type pose or a place you can stand. What would that called? Perch, placement, node, graph. I don't know. I'm just going to call it floor because even though a lot of times it would just be grass or something that isn't technically a floor, we'll know what I mean. All right. So let's go ahead and actually make this happen. You can see here that we call add grounded entity for the standard room, and we make one of these entity space things. That's not going to be useful to us anymore because I want an entity in each of the tiled positions that creates the actual conceptual floor. So what I actually want to do here is I want to do a for I loop to create one in each of those positions. So what I'm going to do is you can see here we get this position here for the abs tile X, Y, and Z. What I actually want to do is loop over with using an offset that takes whatever the standard room size is and does that that 17 by 9 thing to it, right? So let's do offset X equals 0, right? And I guess technically, if we wanted to do these rooms as if they were centered rooms, which maybe we do, right? We would start the offset off, if we were talking about 17, we would start the offset off as being -8, right? And we would let the offset X get up to 8. So that way we would create 17, but they would be a balanced 17, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and create those here. You can kind of see it happening, like so. And what I want to do now is I just want to say, again, it's a 17 by 9, so 9 would be the same. It would be, -4 to 4. And we'll see if we'll probably parameterize that in a little bit, but, because now we've got that kind of defined in two places. But that's, again, not really a concern of mine at the moment, because I'm just, going to sort of push through this code once and make it be representative of how the game actually works at its core. So when I do this add standard room, here we go. I'm going to, when I do this add grounded entity bit here, and I'm doing the standard room collision thing, standard room collision is really presumably now standard floor collision, right? And standard floor collision, I don't know that we really need standard floor collision in the way that it was before. In some sense, this entity doesn't really have any collision because you can't really run into it. It's just a floor tile that you can hop to, and there's no way to bump into the floor tile, I don't think. I don't know, maybe that's not true. It depends, I guess, how we want to look at it. But anyway, that at very least would be standard floor collision, not standard room collision. And when we say that it's traversable, what I don't actually want that to probably mean the same thing as it does, but it's a good name, right? And in some sense, maybe that traversable is actually a very good name for the entity type that we're talking about here. It could be that this entity type is a traversable, in fact. It's just a thing that's sitting there. And so I don't know, like, should it be a flag? Maybe it should be a flag. I don't know, that's a tough decision. That's a really tough decision. And I'm not sure. I guess technically, since we had a flag system there already, maybe I'll stick with the flag system and just say, when you make something, you tag it as traversable, then it's going to be a floor thing that you can stand on. And that seems fair enough. Yeah, I would say. Okay, so we have our abs tile X, and I'm going to add in that offset, right, at this point. And to be honest, I'm not sure why these are U32s, because I thought that we had centered the world around 0. And so I don't understand why the tile values aren't like plus and minus-y. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know why they're U32s. Don't understand why. I guess I only go up or down with them, but I don't, like, that's not something we're going to want to keep. So that probably has to get changed in the future. All right, so let's take a look at standard room collision. Here's the make simple grounded collision thing, and this is going to be just one tile big, right? That's all it's going to be for now. And standard floor collision, well, standard floor collision is the name that I made for this thing, and I'm going to have to change these ones up here. So we actually have, like, let's see, wall collision, floor collision, room collision. And I guess I don't really need to call it floor either, standard really, because it's not sized in any particular way anymore. Okay. So when we add standard room, there is no way to return a single entity anymore because there's a bunch of entities that are created for that room. And so that's just not going to work. We're not going to be able to give that back. If someone wanted it, they're going to have to be a sad panda because they're not going to get it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fix up these last parts here. And so when we draw one of these floor tiles, I'd like to be able to see it. And so I think what I'll do here is, again, we'll just use the same thing we were doing before. We'll do a push rect outline on the collision volume so that we can see where its volume actually is. And I just want to see what that actually ends up doing for us. So yeah, so now we're creating a ton more entities. So we're going to have to reduce the number of screen counts we do, because right now we still have some hard-coded stuff in there where we're like, this is the maximum number of entities you can have. I think we'll probably get rid of that in a little bit as well. What is this? Ground chunk rendering? Yeah, ground chunks are gone. I deleted ground chunks. Goodbye. All right. So yeah, so anyway, in here I'm just going to make it so that we don't create very many screens at all. You know, we'll just do the one we're starting on for now, and then we'll increase it a little bit. But that way, we don't have to wait for anything weird like that. Okay, so now you can see I'm picking these, and hey, we did create them, so that's nice, right? And that's all good. Because this is, you know, I can actually see them there. In fact, if I want to, I can even use our little system here to sort of show where they all are. And that's all great, right? Fantastic. Okay. So I would like to draw them perhaps a little bit more permanently, though. When I do the drawing here, I want to actually, I guess I'm not at the moment drawing the floor things. I think because it's turned off. I do want to actually draw these always. I just want to draw them with actual art. But for now, we'll just draw the collision rectangles, which seems fine. But there we go. So now we can see them all, and that's much better. But we're still not really doing what I wanted to do yet. Because what I want to do now is I want the character to move specifically from one of these to the other, and to understand when he's on a particular one and not, right? So basically, like, the character should be aware of that fact, and should... we need to start considering these things differently than we were, right? They're not traversables in the way that we were thinking them before. Traversables before were like empty spaces, and that you could move through continuously as part of your collision. And that's not really what I want to do, if that makes sense. So what I would like is... I just need to think through how exactly I want these to be used. For starters, I probably will want these to be able to have different elevations. And so that's going to be kind of, or I shouldn't say probably. I know that I want them to have different elevations. The only question is how meaningful that is in terms of like whether that one can be so high that you can't go to it if it's next to you. If that makes sense. So we'll see about that in a second. But that just in general, again, is something that I kind of have to start thinking about more through the pipeline. So the way that we did collision volumes before, right, is we have this concept that a thing references a collision volume, and that collision volume has stuff in it. And so the way that we were doing movement is just by saying, hey, so if something's collision volumes say that you can move into them, then that's like a walkable region, and that's how this dude is moving, right? That's how I'm moving around here. If instead we were to say, oh, when we create that room, like in here, if instead when we did add standard room, if we didn't always add this, like let's say we did something where we said like if offset x is less than -3 or something like that, or maybe greater than -3, then we add the flag. Then we would end up in a situation where you couldn't move into those squares. Even though there's not an obstacle blocking you, you just can't go. And so you see that happen here. Like I can't get any further past that boundary, right? That's not something I can do. And the reason for that, right, is because if we select this guy, I guess we don't have any good selection tools for when there's entities on top of each other. I'm not sure how we necessarily fix that. But what's happening there, right, is when I try to move into this region, I think I guess I don't really know, but I guess what happens currently is you can go up until you would hit the end of it with your end. That's what it looks like, right? Because -3 would be what? What did I say? So it goes to negative. Where's the midpoint? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 on either side, and this would be the midpoint. So -3. This would be 0, -1, -2, -3. Yeah. So essentially it looks like that's the way our thing was working before. And I think I could keep doing this that way, and we could make it so that it worked that way, but I'm not sure that that's useful. I think what I actually want to do is say that traversables just have a point that you can stand on, right? And when you are moving, you go to that point. And when you want to go to the next one, it looks to see in that direction if there is one for you to go to, if that makes sense. That's what I actually want, if that makes sense. So that's actually some work, right? In order to make that happen, that's going to be more complicated. But what that means is also that like the way that we do movement, the part that is people colliding with other people or obstacles, that still makes sense. But the part that we did that was moving through empty space, I don't think does anymore. Because it's not about moving through empty space, it's about moving between specific points. And so, yeah, so there's that. Okay. So again, so now if I kind of come back to that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, for the sake of like pushing this slowly forward, I'm going to take a look at the way. Where's my sim region? Give me my sim region. There we go. I'm going to say that the sim entity. I like that the category regular butter. I like that we. That introspection stuff is so funny. I don't know why it was called regular butter. I wish we knew. All right. Anyway, so here in sim entity, what I want to do is say, okay, if this entity has one of these collision volume groups, I could just probably use that same concept, like these collision volume groups. Here we go. These collision volume groups are, they have a series of things that tell us how the thing collides. What I want to do is say, well, maybe in addition to that, there's also like the concept of traversable points. Is it ibble or ubble? Don't know. Anyway, so if we have one of these, at the moment it's just going to be a P, but I don't know. We might want more information there at some point. Point being, if we have one of these, and there's a traversable there, then you can move to it, and if not, not. And so that's sort of more what I was thinking. And again, yeah, don't know how good of an idea this is or if it's a good idea at all, but I'm just thinking that that's how I want to implement it as a start. And so that way, we could have things and say that there were multiple points, like a single entity that moves around could have multiple traversal points on it that you can move between, if that makes sense. It's always a specific set of points that you can actually stand on. And like I said, most of the time this is just a grid. But I figured we might as well implement it in a way that allows us to build non-grid things if we want to. Because it, like, for example, if you're moving along these things, maybe sometime, you want to do like a little like snaky little path like this or something, and that just might be fun to be able to do that instead. Just something to think about. So I'm going to say that there's this set of traversables, and anything that is has one of these collision volume groups, it can have collision volumes, which are things that you cannot move through, but it can also have traversables, which are things that you can stand on, or points that you can stand on. And so then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the collision routines, which I believe are in here in move entity. So you can see in here the way this works. It's kind of annoying, crappy code that we kind of played around with. But until we want to actually sort of rewrite the collision texture, I'm going to leave it the way it is. We're not going to fuss with it. We're just going to leave it in its sort of prototypey state. But the hero, I'm going to delete this because we don't really need to break when it's the hero specifically at this point. Well, you know what? I'm sure we'll probably use that again, actually, so maybe we won't. Maybe I won't delete it, even though it's not necessary at the moment. So when we do this stuff, and we've got these iterations that we're going through, So what I actually want to do here is I want there to be some sort of conceptual way that this code works that's largely semantic. So I need this, and like I said, it's going to be kind of tricky. I need this function to still work with the collision volumes, but I just need to pull out the part where I need to remove the part that's talking about the traversables, right? So the part where it looks to see if something's traversable, which is like here, I need to remove that, right? And let's see, this is if it's traversable and can collide. So all of this stuff, let's see how we're doing here. So this is all, just kind of refreshing my memory of how we did this. Handle events based on area overlapping, collision loop, yeah. And so here's the ground stuff. So yeah, so get entity ground point now. So this is going to be very formalized, because now what's going to happen is the entity's ground points are always going to be specifically tied to that information about the traversables. So you're always going to be standing on one of those. And when you're moving between two of them, you're going to be like, that's an actual thing that's known. So entities move between two of these points, and they can't change that traversal really, right? Part of the rules of the game are like, when you decide to go from one square to another, you have to touch that square you decided to go to. You can't, like, even if you steer and decide to go down, like, I was going left and then I decided to go down, if you've committed to that square, you're still going to you're going to technically go through it. And that's just, like I said, part of the rules of the way the game works. So yeah, since you're always doing that, there is no such thing as like gravity, really, or z freefall. You're always going to a particular z. So in some sense, yeah, gravity is not really a thing at all. In fact, we can really get rid of this. This stuff can go. There's no such thing as an unsupported entity. There's no such thing as being in freefall. It's just plain not allowed. So yeah. So we're going to get rid of this. Gravity goes away. And that is supported thing, that has to go away as well. So I don't even know, was that just a flag that was set up here? Is supported, Z supported, that's what it was. So Z supported is not here. What does this say? Does it make more sense to have flag non-colliding, collides, non-spatial? Yeah, so some of this, again, some of this stuff is going to go as well. Traversable also, I guess technically we don't really need that flag, because it's just, that would just be if we wanted to optimize. Because really, it's just if you have a traversable point, then you do, So the concept that something's traversable is known from looking at its collision group. So that just seems like it's not really an issue anymore. So yeah, so Z supported. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this stuff. So ground plus equals, like all of this stuff where we take the ground and we change that stuff. This is all not, this is not allowed anymore. All of this is gone. So let's see, blah, 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 blah. That's going away. Yeah, so the isSet traversable thing, basically I want to neuter all of this stuff because that's going to kind of get handled at a separate phase. So all I really want this collision detection routine to do anymore is I really just want it to collide if there's, two entities that are trying to move and they hit each other. That's the only thing that this routine is supposed to be doing at all. And so I just want it to handle that case. It's not supposed to check whether you can go stand somewhere. You can always go stand there if you don't run into an obstacle in the way. So that concept that we had before about also defining the space in which you can move and the ground area, that's no more. That's not how we want this to work anymore. So yeah, so is set entity traversable and this thing and can collide. What I don't know is where do we handle the things that aren't traversable? like, where do we handle colliding with things that are non-traversable, right? Oh, here we go. It's an or. So yeah, so what I really want to know is I really want to know the can collide thing, right? I really just want to know can collide. So if it's can collide, then we go through and we do the volume test. We see whether or not we would hit this thing, right? And that's all good. And I'm not sure where the traversable part was exactly. So we go through the volumes. We say for each test volume, we do our Minkowski dilation. We see whether or not we would hit the walls of this thing. Here is the traversable part. Okay, so we say if it's traversable, then we allow ourselves to go through it, I guess. And that's the part that we're going to have to change. This case is no longer really happening, right? So really all we're doing is this one case here, which is the case where the thing is an obstacle. Okay. And we also need to make it here where I think the T max is all we really have to do with the T max. Before we were computing the furthest we could go by using that T max value. So now we just have to assume that the furthest you can go is all the way, right? So we really, as long as we just set T max to always be 1, I'm assuming that that will solve the problem that what we used to do is we used the collision detector to figure out how far I could go through movable space, right? And that's going away now. So now this entity flag traversable bit, that actually I can get rid of because now what we're going to do is when we create that grounded collision or grounded entity, whatever collision, what I want to do is take the floor collision and add one of those points that you can stand on. So where I do this make simple grounded collision, what I need to do is make this one a little bit more specific. And so what I'm going to probably do is go get that code, make simple grounded collision. Oops. I'm going to take this and I'm going to make like another one of these that's fancier. So make simple traversable or make simple floor collision, something like that. And there we go. So I don't really know what the tile depth. So this was making like an empty area with a certain height to it, and the floor is actually supposed to extend downward a bit, right? It's not supposed to extend upward anymore. So I'm not sure exactly how we want to do that, but I guess tile depth in meters is the thing to pass here probably. And when we call this function, make simple floor collision, what I'm going to do here is say that dim z goes out the bottom. So what is this talking about? Not world arena change to using the fundamental types arena, etc. Oh, okay. Well, we recreate these every time, though, so why am I complaining about that? I don't know why we would need a fundamental types arena. I guess just so we don't... Like, why wouldn't you just create these every time you started the game? I don't know. That seems like a stupid to-do, but I'll leave it for now, because we're not thinking about that stuff right now, so maybe it wasn't as stupid as it sounds. Who knows? Anyway, so this volume stuff, at the moment, I actually don't need this thing to have a collision volume. Now, that doesn't mean I won't want it to have a collision volume in the future, because, like I said, I want some of these to be like higher up potentially than others and things like that. And so, you know, we may go ahead and do that a little bit in the future. But for right now, I don't actually want that to happen. So let's go ahead and make this happen. There we go. So here's my traversable point. Oh, what's the total volume? I don't have a total volume here. I want to include the traversable point in the total volume. Well, I don't know. So I guess what I would say is the total volume is still going to be that dimension. And the offset P is at this point, I think, going to be 1.0 dim z, in the sense that it's displaced downward, right? I guess I don't know what the offset P would be up, so from the current position, so it's actually negative. It goes like down. Or I guess, given the way that we wrote that, if 0.5 is the amount we do, it'd be 0, so it would be entirely below it, right? I think that's how, we'll have to go see how that's actually listed. But anyway, so in here I would then say, okay, I want to do my traversables. That first traversable is going to be at the 0, 0, 0 point, right? It's that middle point. So I really wouldn't even have to initialize it, but that just gives me that one traversable that I wanted, right? And I'm going to go draw these so we can see them. No binary. Oh, right. It's .p. So in here where we do volume count and we draw the volumes out for what we were doing. So let's see, where was that? That was in the floor, right? So where we draw these out here, I'm also going to do a thing where we draw the traversables. And what I should do is I should pull this out into a thing that's like draw collision volume. I don't know why it's not that way as is. We'll probably do that in a second. So here's that traversable point. And wish we had more screen real estate. All right. And I'll just make this called traversable index. So what I'll do here is I'll do a push rect. I'll just basically draw like a point at wherever this thing is. And so I think I just do whatever the volume, whatever the traversable P is. I don't know that I want to do anything else with it. And then we've got the volume dim xy, that's what I want. Oh, well, it's not a volume. It's so really this is just a dim, so I don't know what the dim should be. You know, some number. And then we would draw this as a point you could stand on. Oops. So yeah. That's not great. I'm continually moving upwards. Everything else was fine, but I guess that ground point bit was a problem. Hold, please. I don't actually know how we recompute where the ground point for the entity is, but let's check. Player delta dt, and let's see. Do we have a .z coming in anywhere here? I can't see where I am. Okay. So what exactly do we do with this ground? Handle overlap at ground. Test entity index, can overlap, entities overlap, handle overlap. What does the handle overlap do, pray tell? That just does stairwells. I'm going to pull that for now because we don't have that concept at the moment. So let's just simplify things a little bit here and say that handle overlap is going to go away for the moment. So this all goes away. And now we just have to figure out why we're getting that movement upwards. I assume it's just an offset. Like, you saw what I'm talking about, right? Like, see I'm floating upwards? Not good. So let's see. So what is the position that we actually accept? We take entity dp and update it. So now we've got the velocity that we're going to try. And then I assume through here we've got the tmin, tmax. And when we get out to the bottom, we take our tmin, tmax. We take our player delta and we move the player by that amount. So where is the player delta getting a z displacement from, would be my first question. Because I'm not sure why we would ever get anything into the z component there. Like, that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm going to go ahead and just check to see if player delta is the thing. I'm just going to say player delta z equals 0 to see what happens if we prevent any amount of z motion at the moment. I want to know if it still does it. Okay, so apparently that was it. So we are getting z acceleration in there for some unknown reason. Okay. So anyway, I think that's probably about time to stop for today. But I guess I got a couple more minutes left, so I'm just going to look into this, where we're getting that z motion, where we're getting that from. So we come in here and we are passing in an acceleration. So I guess the first thing I would check is the acceleration ever being set to something positive? So if I was to zero out the z acceleration, would I still get the upward motion? My assumption would have been yes, because I don't think we're ever telling it to accelerate upwards, right? So what that says is that nobody's ever accelerating anything upwards, but we're still getting some upward stuff anyway. So where is that coming from? So here's we're doing some multiplication of the DDP here to normalize it, and we take it and multiply the move spec speed. If we started out with 0 here, then we're not going to get any, we shouldn't ever get any other zeros here. Same thing with this. If we never got any z velocity, we should never see any of that happening. So I'm not really sure what the deal is with that. And then through here, obviously, still, like, none of this stuff seems like it should generate z. And so what I'm wondering is, do we somehow have velocity that's pointing upwards somehow? When and where is that happening, right? So the first thing I'm going to say is, let's go back and look to see when we have Handmade World mode. I'm going to go take a look to see what happens in our movement code here. Do we ever specify some kind of upward motion? If dz is not equal to 0, dz equals... What? The entity, so this looks like there was some jumping code in here, it looks like. But, oh my god. Seriously? You know what that is? The fact that the spacebar starts the game and causes the hero to jump still is where that velocity is coming from. Because we didn't put any hysteresis on it, so it will trigger that. It'll actually trigger the jump code. That's what we're seeing. That's hilarious. So right now, it's this. This is the code. That is the problem. It's one initial jump that I'm doing, essentially. So like spacebar to start was like being interpreted as a jump. That's hilarious. All right, well, at least we know. At least we know. All right, so I'm going to call it for now. We're going to go to Q&A. If anyone has any questions, hit me. No cues? Gonna be an early night. Chrono Dragon. So how will this tile-based movement work? Will you still be able to move freely within a tile, or will the character actually snap to a tile? To be demonstrated later. It is actually neither of those things. Fucon, when will we sort out the coordinate system? Probably like, what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of clean up the sim path thing, and then I'd like to clean up the storage, which is when I assume the coordinate system stuff can get sorted as well. For Godin, is it possible to get access to the source code if I lost access to my old email account? Not so. There's two things that you can use for access. One is the link that you got when you purchased originally, and the other is your email address. But if you have neither of those two things, then there is no way for us to know if you're someone who purchased it. So we can't actually determine whether, right? Like we don't have any way of associating you with something else. If you have like even a PayPal reference number would probably be sufficient maybe for us to dig it up, but you need some piece of information that nobody else could forge that proves that you're a person who purchased the thing, if that makes sense. So usually you're going to need either the link or the email, but if you happen to have something else like a PayPal like proof of purchase kind of a thing, that may be okay, depending on what it has in it. Miblo, how about stairwells? Their traversal used to be seamless as far as I remember. Now that the rooms are locked, how will stairwells work? What will happen is you'll move between them still, and it'll blend between them, but you can't change direction on the way down or up. And that's very intentional, actually, because most of the time when you go down a thing, you won't be able to get back up again. Like it's like you got to commit. So that's actually by design. The I Burley. Any plans on changing Visual Studio Code instead of the full IDE? I believe the full debugger is included. Well, two things. One, I'm not sure why we would. But two, I actually, at least on the Linux one that people were talking about, it didn't have even close to all the features. Like they didn't show disassembly and stuff like that apparently, and so I don't know if there's like a Windows one that's better or something, but someone would have to verify that it's like better in some way. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we would. Long Boolean, what are the benefits trade-offs in having each tile be an entity? So the reason that I wanted every tile to be an entity was because I want you to be able to do anything to a tile that you could do to anything else, right? Like, you know, I don't know how far we'll push it in terms of when we're actually trying to, like, for lack of a better term, tune, which is, again, not really my job description, but when we're trying to make sure that the game is, like, playable and fun, I don't know how much of it we'll use, but obviously, like, let's say you have a ground tile, and there's the concept of some spell or something that causes things to levitate, or that makes something heavy, or that turns something into water. We just want everything to work everywhere, basically. And so if you want this to happen, the floor should be able to react to everything just the same way everyone else does. So it should participate fully in every transaction that occurs, if that makes sense. So having them be entities, that's a bonus. And the other bonus is we can create our levels out of non-grid patterns if we want to. Whereas if we forced it to be a grid, we could never do that. So I'm just deciding to go that route instead because, I mean, one of the things that's true is computers are very powerful. And so, you know, in a 2D game, sometimes it's a good idea to try and use that horsepower to do interesting things because you're not using that horsepower to do 3D rendering, fancy photorealistic stuff. So you want to put that horsepower somewhere. You don't just want the game to run at 50,000 frames a second and be boring, right? And so what I'm going to try and do is like focus a lot of that energy on entity simulation. So all of those cycles we're not spending on 3D calc stuff, we put into the sim. Yeah, so, but as far as the trade-offs are concerned, if we had made it in a grid, we get to compress a lot of that down. And if they aren't entities, because then we could just store the minimal amount of information, we can store it in a 2D array, and it's much more compact. So we're not wasting as much memory bandwidth, we're not wasting as much testing time. There's a lot of stuff that we can eliminate if we just assume that everything's always a grid. So basically we're giving up a bunch of optimizations, is what we're giving up. Toby Peters, are you allocating your entities on the heap or stack? Heap, right? Could you even allocate enough on the stack? So part of the problem with that question is that heap and stack, like when you say on the stack, you mean the stack for function calls. And the answer is no, we're not allocating on the stack for function calls. But sure, you could allocate them on the stack for function calls if you wanted to for some reason, but you don't want entities to be tracked on the stack for function calls because their lifetime has nothing to do with the stack for function calls, if that makes sense, right? We don't allocate them on the heap in any real sense of the word because the heap is actually a layer down from virtual alloc, right? Virtual alloc isn't really the heap because there actually is a thing that is the heap, and the heap we aren't using. That's if we were calling heap alloc or something like that, right? So there actually is, there's the VM, there's a virtual memory system, which you might call the heap. Then there's the heap, which is built on top of the virtual memory system. We're not using that. And then there's the stack, which is also built on top of the virtual memory system. And we are using that because we kind of have to. Like C does it automatically, and there's nothing we can do about that, right? So where we're allocating stuff is we have essentially our own stack that is not a function stack. It's just a regular stack that we use in memory. And we virtual alloc a block of memory, and we just allocate from that stack. And that's where the entities are right now. Any more cues? BTN Games says he asked a queue. Where is your queue? BTN Games. Do you foresee complications with the new grid entity floor system and the texture slats given that you want a variable height per traversal entity? Like I said before, I nuked the texture slats. So that's not how it's rendered anymore. That's why I deleted the ground chunk. Those were the ground chunks. Dude in basement. Handle RBNE1R or LR. Confusion over atomics. Who is Ribnalar? And what is his confusion over atomics? If modern CPUs usually reorder or merge writes, how do they use memory mapped registers? Can you even bitbang a serial protocol with it? Yeah, I mean, the important thing to remember is that the CPU is as strongly ordered as you need it to be, because you could put in fencing and stuff like that. So the complete answer to that question is it depends exactly what you're doing, right? First of all, certain areas of memory, like pages of memory, are marked in specific ways. So for example, some memory is right combining memory, some memory isn't right combining memory, blah, blah, blah. So most CPUs, when that have a memory management unit, that memory management unit knows information about pages that are mapped. So it's not like the CPU behaves the same way when it's talking about a page that's mapped for hardware I/O versus a page that's mapped for just use by the CPU, right? So first of all, the MMU will do different things depending on when it knows that it's a special kind of memory that it's looking at. And then the other thing is the CPU obviously can be instructed to put barriers and fences in between things so that the reorder window will not reorder things above and below specific markers. So, you can put in an mm fence command or various things like this that will say, this is not supposed to move any store commands above this, thing in the reorder buffer or anything below it. So when you are in a situation like an OS or driver writer will find themselves in when dealing with the hardware, you have to know your CPU, you have to know your memory subsystem, and you have to, take into account all of it, right? And do it correctly. In the old days, obviously, it was really easy because old school CPUs, there was none of this. There wasn't a cache, So, and there was no such thing as like out of order execution. Long Boolean, what is the plan with rendering when the hero walks behind a piece of terrain that is on a higher level and obscures the hero? I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure what I want to do to render that. I'm not sure how often that would ever actually happen. But I don't know. I'm not sure how we want to render that. Jim Zero, will this system fix the collision areas getting stuck in each other if stacked example, 2 heroes loading at the same position. When we do our final collision detection, we will make sure that stuff works. But right now, I'm not actually trying to improve the collision detector. I'm just changing the game to work the way that the final design wants it to work. It's not trying to improve the quality, if that makes sense. All right, not much queues today, so I guess that's good. Let's go ahead and shut down. All right, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org with the handy dandy pre-order button. And it comes with all the source code, so you can follow along with it at home. We also have a forum site you can go to, which will be shutting down this weekend for 2 days while they test. It's getting moved to Handmade Network, and they're going to be testing it this weekend before bringing it back up again. So yeah, so go check out the forum site, but be aware that sometime Friday night, I'm guessing, they'll be shutting it down. And then it'll be back on Monday for our stream. We also have a Patreon page if you want to support the video series. We have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you if you want to know when the series is going to be live on stream. And we also have this little handy dandy button, which you can use, which tells you the next time it's going to be live. Of course, in this case, it is actually live, but it would give you a little countdown timer normally. That's about it. Until then, until tomorrow, which I guess, well, you know what? Tomorrow's Thursday, so I won't be here. So I'll be back here Friday. I'll be off tomorrow. I'll be back here Friday. Until then, have fun programming, and I will see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.